What happens when all of this disappears? This Urban Sentinel, and let's get into it. I'm inside a local big box wholesaler store, and the date is Sunday, September 29th. There is a ILA strike, International Longshoremen Association strike, basically a dock workers union, set to take place on Tuesday, October 1st, coming up. This roughly entails over 20,000 dock workers from, the top of Bangor, Maine, all the way down to the Gulf in Texas. Roughly 30 to 40% of all our nation's supplies that come in from the ocean, coming across from the Atlantic and the Gulf areas, come through those docks. It potentially could cause some major problems, but I wanted to discuss with you some of the things that it won't do immediately. Now, as you can see briefly behind me, there are row upon row, shelf upon shelf of supplies and goods all here. Everything from motor oil, cleaning detergents, pretty much any product that each and every single one of us use at some point in time in our lives on a regular basis, especially the ever-present toilet paper. Now, should this strike go forward on Tuesday and the dock workers stop working, they stop unloading the ships, they stop moving the cargo trailers and containers onto the trucks and onto the trains that then would normally go to warehouse distribution centers and then be sent out to the retail establishments, whether it's Walmart, Amazon, any place else like that, there could be problems, but it's not going to happen the way you think it is. Back there behind me is all of the fresh produce and the fresh food section. What people forget is when imported fresh goods come in, they've spent 3 to 5 days on a container on a ship. They come into those docks, they get moved off of the ships onto tractor trailers and trains, and then spend the next day or two traveling anywhere across the country to get to retail or wholesale distributor warehouses where they're stacked from floor to ceiling, and then the point of sale system at the retail stores is the indicator for what supplies are being needed, and that's when you see them show up. So when you go into your grocery store, you go into any of the chain stores and you see fresh produce there, that fresh produce has probably been off of the vine or out from the ground for almost a week and a half or so, and reasonably speaking still has a good week worth of shelf life before it starts to turn. These wholesalers can only keep so much fresh produce on hand because it's going to spoil. But that would be the first indicator, is when you see less imported produce on the shelves, because that means that they're not getting more in, and effectively speaking, the warehouses are emptying out the supplies because the retailers are taking in whatever stock that they can, trying to get it going before it goes bad. Now, when you're talking about dog food, paper towels, toilet paper, socks, sneakers, that sort of thing, it's a completely different scenario. You're not going to see empty shelves the first week, second week, third week. Really, you're not going to notice anything gone wrong for about a month. Once the supplies in places like these aren't available from the warehouses and their shelves start getting thin, then yeah, that's when you'll see a problem. So that means, reasonably speaking, end of October going into November. Now, what that also means is you shouldn't neglect your supplies and your food stockpiles. You should take a look at what you have, and again, think about how much do you go through in a week, in 2 weeks, in a month. Because in some cases, you're perfectly fine. You don't need to get anything else. Other cases, you may want to say, okay, we'll grab an extra one of these, maybe 2 more of those, and we'll see how we do over the next month. We'll see what happens, because again, you can go out and you can spend $200, $300, $400, $500, which nowadays doesn't get you too much, but you can spend that money and stock up floor to ceiling in your place on a bunch of stuff. And then when something happens and you need that extra cash, sure, you're not going to go hungry, but maybe your car doesn't get fixed, or maybe suddenly that repair that you need to get done on your house doesn't get done. So you have to take those things into consideration. So if they do go on strike, we're not going to notice anything on the retail aspect for at least 2 to 3 weeks, guaranteed. It's one of those things where when it happens, it's not going to be as dramatic as a Hollywood movie would have it be. I mean, is there a chance that you're going to see hundreds of people racing in to buy everything that they can? Sure. So the people that are most likely to panic buy are going to be the people that didn't prepare at all, that didn't plan ahead, that always believed that nothing like this could ever possibly happen. And of course, as we all know, that nothing like this ever happens until it happens. So a big part of emergency preparedness is the being prepared, having a plan, having your supplies, your needed equipment, things like that set aside. In a situation where you already know you've got 3 days, 3 weeks, hopefully even 3 months worth of supplies ahead of your bulk goods, your dry goods, your canned goods, things like that that aren't going to go bad, your shelf-stable foods, but also other things, socks, underwear, soap, toothpaste, things like that that you don't normally think of, because most people don't run through a single tube of toothpaste in a week or a month or even 2 or 3 months, unless of course you've got like 8 people sharing the same tube. But regardless, those small items that you rarely go through that often, you always want to make sure, do you have an extra one? Do you have an extra two? Whatever the situation is, start looking at those supplies now and then pay attention to the news. This dock worker strike could get resolved on Monday before anything happens. It might happen on Tuesday, and then by Friday it gets resolved. And again, we're not going to see anything instantaneously. This is not some panic hype driven video. It's a simple fact that should they go on strike on Tuesday, by Friday you're not going to notice a difference. The following Tuesday, you're still not going to notice a difference unless you are ordering items that have to be custom made from someone overseas. At that point, then yes, you would say, okay, there's a problem. Everything else, when you order from Amazon, you order from Walmart, you order anything at all, it's most likely already here in country in a warehouse. So if truckers went on strike, that would be an issue. If railroad workers went on strike, that would be an issue. If the National Organization of Warehouse Workers went on strike, that would be an issue. But for right now, it's just the longshoremen, just the dock workers, and it's not even across both coasts. The West Coast is not part of this. This is specifically these union workers on the East Coast and the Gulf Coast. So with those two areas, it does still affect a large portion of the shipping that comes in, but it's not the end-all be-all to everything. There's still merchandise, there's still items in country, in here already. And if something's domestically grown, domestically manufactured, and doesn't rely on any outside imports for parts, equipment, accessories, and so forth, that's not going to be interrupted at all. That's still going to be go online, scroll, click, order, and it'll be on your doorstep in 3 to 5 days. So again, that being said, look at what you have now, think forward. Can you get through this upcoming month? Do you have enough to last you through October? So in the event that this does go that long, you know that you're not going to be for want. You'll have what you need for you and yours to get through. And if you decide, okay, I'm going to put a little bit more into this, pick up a few extra of these, whatever the situation is, then go ahead and do that. And you think from that point forward, just keep an eye on the news. And again, start watching for those small things. The fresh produce, specifically imported fruits and vegetables, that's going to be the canary in the coal mine, because once you don't see it showing up at your grocery store, especially if you live near multiple chain stores where you can relatively quickly go from one store to the next store to the next store, and you see that they're definitely out of, food coming in from over in Africa or from over in Western Europe, or you see that it takes a little bit longer for the food to come up from South America because now it's going by truck and train through multiple countries and multiple stops before it gets up to the United States, instead of just getting on one container, one boat, and being shipped up to the Gulf Coast. Little things like that will be the indicator that if the strike is going on, that now it's hitting that point where a lot of the hard goods, the shelf-stable goods, are going to be starting to get lower and lower in the warehouse stocks. And at a certain point, depending upon the retail establishment, you may not notice it right away. You may not see a single bit of change, but in smaller stores or outlet areas, you may start to notice that the shelves do seem to be either thin or the workers spend a lot of time, as they did during the COVID period, fluffing up the shelves, making sure that everything is fully up to the edge and top to bottom, but there's nothing behind it. Sort of like, don't look at the man behind the curtain scenario. Anyway, that's all I got for you right now, and I'll catch you in the next one.